start, when Andreas Brockmann first got in touch and asked me if I wanted to participate in the transmediale, he asked me what I wanted to show, and I said I would like to talk about my extra ear project, but it will not be finished in time. And Andreas said, perfect. In these projects and performances, the body is seen as a kind of evolutionary architecture that operates and becomes aware in the world. And we're kind of now in a sort of an interesting era where the body is extended in differing directions and with varying trajectories. In other words, we've been able to, with plastination, indefinitely preserve a corpse. But with technological life support systems, we can now indefinitely extend the life of a comatose patient. So a comatose body and a corpse can simultaneously be extended and preserved indefinitely. When I talk about fractal flesh, I mean bodies and bits of bodies spatially separated but electronically connected, generating recurring movements, interactive movements at differing scales. And this is what's happening now with people connected on the net. And when I talk about the phantom body, I mean phantom not as in phantasmagoric, but rather as in phantom limb experiences. In other words, with increasing haptics being used over the net, it'll be possible to generate much more potent physical presences at remote distances. So this idea of plastinated bodies is an idea of preserving a corpse in ways in which it could not be preserved before, and of course displayed in ways that anatomical structures could not be seen. So instead of floating in formaldehyde, now with the work of Günther von Hagens in Germany, it's possible to preserve a corpse indefinitely. With the first suspension performances, the body here is seen as a kind of sculptural medium. Can we have the sound off in this one, please? Just hit, yeah. The body here is suspended in varying situations, in differing locations. And in Copenhagen, the body was suspended from ground level. And the embarrassing situation here was that as I was being hoisted up and I was looking down, I realized that people were looking up. And in this performance, the stretched skin is a kind of gravitational landscape. This is what it takes for the body to be suspended in a 1G gravitational field. And in these suspension performances, varying locations, there's very little bleeding except in the thigh area. If you stick the hooks into muscle, you'll get a lot of bleeding. If you avoid muscle, it's generally okay. We edited out all the screaming and the bleeding at the end. I didn't think you'd be interested in seeing that. Okay, the next video clip. The last suspension I did was a suspension from a monorail station in Ofuna in Japan, and the body here was also suspended with the third hand attached. My third hand, in fact, was controlled by electrical signals from the muscles. So the the leg muscles ordinarily and the abdominal muscles. So it enabled independent movement of the three hands. Can we have the sound for this, please? And the sound up. Sound off, yeah. Just sound off, so mute it. You can just mute it. Yeah. I had control of the up and down movement of the body, and also was able to individually control the movements of the three hands. The sounds that you heard were amplified body signals and sounds. In performances, often my brain waves, heartbeat, muscle signals were amplified as acoustical signals. And so as the body fatigued, the sounds changed. So the sounds, in a sense, register the fatigue and the physiological changes that occur in the body. This performance was the last suspension performance. There were about 13 performances over a period of about 27 performances over a period of 13 years. And most of these were done with no audience. The idea of an audience was kind of irrelevant, really. Although in Copenhagen and in New York, these were funded by galleries and festivals, so they became public events. But generally speaking, the only people who saw these performances were people who were just incidentally in the area, or who happened to come to the gallery, or were going past in the train, or were at the seaside. Can we go now to the stomach sculpture? In 1993, for the 5th Australian Sculpture Triennale, whose theme was site-specific works, I decided to design a sculpture for the inside of the body. So instead of a sculpture for a public space, this was a sculpture for a private internal space. And here we're testing the mechanism. There's a flashing light, a beeping sound, and the sculpture opens and closes. Closed, it was safely able to be inserted. And it was inserted about 40 centimetres into the stomach cavity. It took 2 days and 6 attempts to shoot the 15 minutes of video. And whereas with the third hand, technology is attached externally to the body, here the body becomes a host for a work of art. So the body is not a site for the self, but simply for a sculpture. The third hand, I did try to do some things like here, writing one word simultaneously with the three hands, each hand writing a different letter at the same time. So if you imagine the first three letters were E, L and I, V, U and O, O, T and N, you had to keep your 2 eyes on what your three hands were doing, and you had to remember the sequence of letters. And because this performance occurred on a sheet of glass between the body and the audience, I had to learn to write it back to front.